There are quite a few options out there in terms of navigating and safety out in nature. Besides avalanche beacons, which is a totally different topic because that is no part in the navigation at least, there are other options. So starting with the GPS and going over an Inreach or simple maps. But what is equally reliable is actually a phone nowadays. It didn't used to be because neither the GPS was good enough nor the reception itself. But depending a little bit on which area you're going into, your phone might actually be the simplest and most affordable option. Plus maps. There's fairly a way around going on maps, you know. I still use them, not so much in certain areas, but when it comes to specific areas that I want to go into, it's good to have them. Landmediteriet, in particular here in Sweden, that's what they're for. They have those Fjällkartan. If you're going out on the fjell in Sweden, being that the southern Kungsleden, northern Kungsleden, you know, or King's Trail, or whatever you want to call it, or different areas along the Swedish-Norwegian border, your best option is going to be Fjällkartan. But they don't produce those so many anymore. But the easiest way to do it, especially when you just want to look into a certain area, is actually look on the website and print them out yourself. It's fairly easy if you can find the bloody map. It's this website is a pain in the ass, to be honest, but it works quite well. I did that quite a few times. I personally don't really like PDFs that much. You know, you can laminate them as well, you know, if you're really into it, but otherwise they tend to soak a little bit and whatnot, you know, so it's not really that reliable option. This map here, it's an overview map of Sweden, but what's the funny part in it, it actually has all the Kungsleden trail marks on it, which is actually the easiest and simplest option you can do. I used this one when I went on my Northern Kungsleden hike, like, I don't know, 7 years ago or something. And since then, I still have this map. Obviously, I put it in a bag and stuff like that, you know, so to keep it from getting moisture on it. But it works really well because, especially in Sweden, you have trail markers everywhere. You know, you have the SDF cabins or whatever, you know, marked. So you really don't need anything else, really. But if it comes to more sophisticated versions, a GPS is always good to have. I actually only use the GPS nowadays for tracking my kilometers for the dogs and whatnot, you know, so that is the primarily use of them. I have the eTrex 30XX. There's actually the Svalbard map on it because Svalbard obviously is a little bit more complicated in certain aspects because yes, you're just going through valleys, but the GPS is definitely the easier version of it, you know. So here in Sweden, I only use it for GPS tracking in terms of kilometers. That's all it. Since Sweden and the trail infrastructure is so well built out, you don't really need that so much. And yeah, you can get maps and whatnot, you know, and just load them on here. Fairly easy. I personally don't like the cheaper GPS versions where you only have tracking points, which would lead us to this one here. It's the old Inreach. The Explorer version, so it's a little bit better compared to the lower version. But since you only have tracking points, it actually only helps you if you're going to the North Pole or to Antarctica or something, you know, where you have open space and you're just going along the tracker. Otherwise, I don't really like to go after tracking marks on the GPS because, I mean, that's what you have trail markers on other trails for and whatnot, you know, so you don't really need that so much. The Inreach, however, as probably all of you know, is important for the SOS signal. You can get the smaller version. Nowadays, obviously, Garmin bought them, so you have the two versions combined. That's actually the best option to have. If you buy the small, the Inreach small tracker mini, I think it was called, you have the same as with this one here. You can connect that with your app on your phone, and then you have a full map. But in certain areas it makes sense, but in Sweden it absolutely makes no sense unless you really want to have the SOS function, which I don't really think it's that important in Sweden, because every other cabin, when you're going along the main trail, at least like Kungsleden and whatnot, you have emergency phones and everything, you know, fjell phones. You're going through villages at times, you know, so not really that necessary unless you're really inexperienced and you really have to rely on it. Otherwise, it really is no use, in my opinion. So, brings us to the last point. Your phone. You have it anyway, you know, and nowadays you actually get some really, really cool apps. Sweden Topo Maps is the one that I use on my phone. By the way, I'm recording the audio with this one. You have your phone on you anyway, and the majority of parts in Sweden and in the mountains of Sweden, you actually have reception. There's only certain areas where you don't, which is really in the northern parts. When you're deep in the mountains, like around Kebnekaise, for example. Kebnekaise Abisko, that is an area where you have really like a dead zone. In Norway, it's a little bit more complicated, but when you're going specifically in Sweden, in the majority of areas, you have cell phone reception. So your phone is definitely the easiest thing to have. Besides the map, obviously. The map is always a good thing to have, but just an overview map. And then if you really want to go into detail, have an additional app on your phone. So what's cool on the Topo Map Sweden Topo Map, you will see it, is that it's that you can actually, like, when you don't have cell phone reception, you can still use it. You just have to preload all those maps into the app, meaning you just open it up when you have cell phone reception, you go into a certain area, and then you just mark it as you want to have this map on your phone, and then it downloads it to specific, like also like in terms of scaling or whatever, you can go quite low down, or you just keep it fairly open. I use that option all the time when I'm going out now on tours and stuff like that, the last 2 years at least since I use this app. The caveat on it is the app costs like, you know, 10-12 euros or something like that, but for what you get, it's definitely worth it. I mean, every Fjällkartan costs you like 15-20 kroners, you know, 15-20 euros. So in terms of value for the money, that's definitely the way to go, because you always have your phone, you know, listening to music or whatever. Obviously, you have to bring a little bit bigger power bank with you, you know. If you want to go ultralight, that's obviously less of an option. However, if you're not really concerned on not being able to recharge, you can actually like go to the main field stations, you know, the big ones in Sweden and so, and just recharge your shit. It's fairly easy. So overview map and your phone is actually the easiest option. Just look into the areas that you going into specifically that you really have phone reception, because it depends a little bit on what who's the provider. Telia is fairly good in Sweden, but there is certain areas where even Telia sucks. But the majority of it is, I mean, it's the same with in Germany, Telekom or whatever. You know, you have certain. Besides the fact that the Swedish telephone net is way better than in Germany or in the majority of other places. So have that a little bit in mind, but the majority of times your phone is more than enough to go out on a trail, especially when you go a little bit lighter and whatnot. If you're inexperienced, definitely look into either the Inreach or the Spot. Spot is obviously, it's a totally stripped down version. You only have the SOS button, you know, and tracking function, but not like, you know, no maps or anything. So plenty of options. Look into what you need and what you think you need, and yeah, off you go. Have a good one.